1955. A Tuesday morning in a small house on a new suburban street, the kind of street that didn't exist 10 years earlier. The light comes in low through a kitchen window, and that window is perfectly clear, not a streak on it. There's no blue spray bottle under the sink. There is no cabinet of 12 different cleaners, each one promising to do one job. There's a jug of white vinegar, a box of baking soda, a tin of scouring powder, and a folded stack of yesterday's newspaper. That's nearly all of it. And the woman who runs this house can make every room in it gleam, using little more than what you'd find in a wartime pantry. We tend to picture the 1950s home as spotless. The shining floors, the bright windows, the kitchen so clean it almost looked unused. And here's the strange part. That picture is basically true. Homes really were kept to a standard that would exhaust most of us today. But the reason had almost nothing to do with better products. In fact, the products that built that reputation were cheap, simple, and are sitting in your kitchen right now, mostly forgotten. These are the cleaning methods that made mid-century American homes shine, why they actually worked, and the quiet reason they vanished. Before we count down, do me one quick favor and subscribe. This channel is built entirely on bringing these forgotten things back. Now, let's begin. Number 10. Newspaper on the windows. If you walked into that 1955 kitchen and asked the woman how the glass got so clear, she wouldn't point to a bottle. She'd point to the newspaper. The method was simple. A splash of vinegar and water, wiped down, then buffed dry with a crumpled sheet of newsprint. The belief at the time was that newspaper had no lint to leave behind, and that the dense paper buffed glass to a shine cloth couldn't match. It cost nothing. The paper was already in the house, already read, on its way to the bin. Now here's the honest part most nostalgia videos won't tell you. Back then there was a second worry, the ink. Old newspaper ink could smudge onto your hands and onto the window frame. That problem has quietly disappeared, because today more than 90% of newspapers are printed with soy-based ink, which barely smears at all. But honesty cuts both ways. Modern testing shows a good microfiber cloth actually beats newspaper now. So this trick is half true. It worked, it still works, but it was never magic. Hold on to that idea, because the newspaper trick tells you something important about how this entire system worked. And we'll come back to it. Number 9. Vinegar as the everything cleaner. Long before the aisle of specialized sprays, one cheap acid did a dozen jobs. Vinegar went into the mop water for floors. It went onto mirrors and glass. It went into the dishwasher. There's a 1950s housekeeping manual, America's Housekeeping Book, that tells the homemaker to add half a cup of vinegar to the rinse to bring a shine to glass and china. One bottle, many rooms. But notice something already. Even the period manuals had rules. That same book warns the reader, in plain language, never to use vinegar on an enameled sink. Think about what that tells you. These women weren't following a folk superstition. They understood they were working with an acid. They knew it cut grease and dissolved mineral scale, and they knew that same power could damage the wrong surface. They had a working knowledge of their tools that we've largely traded away. That detail matters, and it's going to matter more later. Number 8, baking soda, the gentle scrubber. If vinegar was the acid, baking soda was the soft abrasive, the thing you reached for when a surface needed scouring but couldn't take a scratch. It went onto sinks and tubs and dulled aluminum pots. It sat open in the refrigerator, quietly pulling odors out of the air. In the leanest years, it even stood in for toothpaste. One box, pennies. And it did work, that we now buy 3 separate products to do. A sink scrub, a fridge deodorizer, a cookware polish, all of it in a single yellow box that cost almost nothing. Number 7, lemon and salt. Here the kitchen and the cleaning cupboard were the same place. Half a lemon dipped in salt was how you brought a copper pot back to life. The acid cut the tarnish, the salt gave it grip. Lemon deodorized a wooden cutting board. Squeezed into the laundry rinse and hung in the sun, it gently brightened whites. Nothing here was sold as a cleaning product. It was food doing a second job. And that's the quiet theme building under this whole list. Almost nothing in that 1955 kitchen had only one purpose. Number 6. Borax, the laundry secret. This one had a brand name, and that brand name became part of American life. 20 Mule Team Borax, named for the wagon teams that once hauled it out of Death Valley. Borax softened hard water, boosted the wash, and worked as a mild all-purpose cleaner. One quick note of honesty though, borax isn't quite as harmless as the nostalgia suggests. It's a known irritant, and Europe has actually restricted some of its uses, so it's not something to be careless with around skin or lungs. But here's the detail worth slowing down for. The company behind it sponsored a radio program and then a television program called Death Valley Days. And they sponsored it for 40 years. 40 years of putting that product into American homes through the speaker and the screen. So even here, even with one of the simple, old-fashioned staples on this list, you were being advertised to. Hold on to that, because it's the thread that ties this whole story together. If you're enjoying this so far, the next few are where it gets interesting, because we're about to move from single tricks to something much bigger. Number 5, the bread trick. This is the one almost nobody remembers. In homes heated by coal and lit by gas, the walls slowly darkened with soot, and wallpaper couldn't simply be washed with water without ruining it. So the solution was bread. A wad of soft, stale bread rolled gently across the wallpaper, lifted the grime and the fingerprints away. The dough was just sticky and absorbent enough to pick up what a damp cloth would only smear. It sounds absurd now. It worked then. And it quietly disappeared in the late 1950s, when washable vinyl wallpaper arrived and the problem it solved simply no longer existed. Remember that? The trick didn't fail. The world around it changed, and the trick was left behind. Number 4, bluing. White fabric naturally yellows over time, and the mid-century answer wasn't bleach, it was a trick of the eye. A few drops of blue liquid called bluing went into the final rinse. The faint blue canceled out the yellow, and the whites read as brilliantly white to anyone looking. The product, Mrs. Stewart's Bluing, has been sold since 1883, and remarkably, it is still made today. Think about that for a second, an optical illusion in a bottle, sold for pennies, and it outlasted nearly every flashier product that came after it. Number 3, the weekly rota. Now we move from products to ritual, and this is the real engine of the spotless home. The mid-century house didn't get clean in frantic bursts. It got clean on a schedule so universal it was stitched onto kitchen towels and taught to children. Monday was wash day. There's a 1950s manual that says it was a matter of pride to get the laundry on the line as early Monday morning as possible. Tuesday was ironing. Wednesday was mending. Friday was cleaning day, the deep dust, the mop, the polish. Saturday got the house company ready for Sunday. Nothing was ever allowed to pile high enough to become overwhelming, because everything already had its day and tomorrow had its own. The secret wasn't a stronger chemical. It was rhythm, and rhythm is something no product can ever sell you. Number 2, spring cleaning. Once a year, that steady rhythm became a full reckoning. Rugs were carried outside and beaten over the clothesline until the dust stopped rising. Mattresses were turned and aired in the open window. Curtains came down and were washed. The walls themselves were scrubbed from top to bottom. It took days. It was physically punishing. And it points directly at the truth this whole video has been circling. A truth that needs to be said plainly right now before the final one. Because here is the turning point of the entire story. We look back and imagine these women were keeping some lost secret. They were not. What they had was time, and an enormous invisible amount of unpaid labor. Historians who studied this era actually measured it. Across the time-use studies of the period, the average homemaker spent close to 52 hours a week running the house. 52 hours. That is a full-time job and then a second part-time job stacked on top of it, with no wage, no overtime, and no weekend. And it gets sharper. The historian Ruth Schwartz Cowan studied what happened when the so-called labor-saving machines arrived, and she found something almost cruel. The hours did not fall. The standard simply rose to swallow them. The washing machine did not free the housewife, it just meant the family now expected cleaner clothes more often than anyone would have demanded before. Every new convenience raised the bar instead of lowering the effort. The spotless 1950s home was real, but it was built on the back of one person, and it quietly cost her almost everything she had to give.